Right, we move on now to item 9, and it's the Auckland Council Group quarterly performance to the 31st of December. It's a little bit academic, although we will go through this because, of course, the next item gives you a more recent update, but it is something that has to happen by way of regular reporting from a quarterly perspective. So I'll now ask Nicola and Ross to present the second quarter results, and John. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll lead off with what the group picture looked like for the 6 months to 31 December 2020. It is, as the Chair said, old news. It's not about a date. You'll hear the update about more recent performance a little bit later. This is the material that is covered in the half-year report that's already been released. So this information is generally out there publicly, but this is our regular quarterly performance reporting pack and report that's on the agenda for you. So just moving through the slides, if we go to the device, just go to the overall snapshot for the group. So CapEx delivery was strong. So it was $1.2 billion of CapEx delivered for the 6 months for the group, which was very similar to the same period a year earlier, which was pre-COVID. So despite the impact of COVID, the council group's been able to maintain strong capital delivery. A little bit less than budget, but 93% delivered overall across the group. So quite a strong overall performance. In terms of operating performance, so it is quite a favourable picture that the numbers show for that 6-month period. So compared to the budget that was set, so compared to the emergency budget, which had $450 million less revenue than had been the case predicted pre-COVID, compared to that sort of pessimistic budget of what we thought it would be, it's been slightly more favourable than that. So $100 million more favourable over that 6-month period. So strong results, particularly in terms of regulatory consenting and the infrastructure growth charges. So again, it's consenting and development activity that's really held up quite strongly, as well as rent in some places, rental income. At the same time, expenditure has been favourable to budget, $90 million favourable to budget for that period. So that's control of costs. A bit of some costs have been delayed as some spending hasn't occurred. Some of the things, provisions for cleaning, etc., for COVID weren't as not as much was required as we might have thought when we set the budget. So overall, a good strong result for that 6-month period. In terms of debt, did you want to talk to the debt side, John?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So on the debts situation, given the strong or relatively strong financial performance compared to budget, net debt is lower than we'd previously forecast. And we look at debt to revenue with emergency budget, we did expect it to peak around 290%. We now expect that peak to be lower, around 285%. Credit ratings remain strong, AA and AA2 on stable outlook, and we're not expecting those to change.
Thanks, John. So moving on to the group FTE picture. So overall, FTEs over that 6-month period decreased by 167 FTEs. So the majority of that was Auckland Council. That'll be covered part of the parent bit. And so you've seen we've got some increases there in water care and Auckland Transport, both in frontline service delivery areas. Some of that's in areas with revenue attached. And within with Auckland Unlimited, some drops there. So that's less activity occurring, less events being delivered, so less staff being required. So that's picture overall, 167. The others, the CCOs kind of balance out, and it's largely the reduction in Auckland Council FTEs, which is has been planned and signalled previously. So that's the FTE picture. And moving on to the Auckland Council performance, I'll hand over to Nicola.
Thank you, Ross.
So starting with capital performance, our capital expenditure's been at 80% of the budget, so we've delivered some good projects in the first 6 months, but our program is going a bit more slowly than what we thought. Part of the reason for that is obviously the budget was set later this year in July, and there's a process following that to agree work programs with local boards. So that has slowed down the commencement of the program. We are also seeing some pandemic-related challenges. So as lockdowns hit, also quite a tight labour market and some supply chain disruption, actually getting some parts and things into the country. So those things are affecting capital performance a bit, but we have delivered some great projects despite those challenges. One of them is the Grayland Park, the new changing rooms, where you can see some great design in that park and other improvements as well to pedestrian safety and greenways. Another project was in Birkenhead in the Leroy's Bush Little Shoal Bay area, the track upgrades, which are being renewed, and this is obviously helping to mitigate against kauri dieback. This is highly recommended by my mum. And I'm going to ask Craig McElroy just to come and talk about the next project, which is pretty amazing out in Takanini.
Welcome, Craig.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'd just like to update you on the Kerry Wetland project. This is the whole ability to service the new growth area in Papakura, and it's really exciting to be able to create a new natural environment out of what previously was greenfield area. And I think anyone who's been out there, you couldn't believe that this asset is so new because it looks so natural already. And it's been a big investment program for council. So we've spent on this program to date $101 million. Now, not all of that is the wetland, but I want to remind council that the Grove Road box culvert and the artillery tunnel provide the connectivity from this wetland to the harbour, and so you need to look at it as an integrated whole. Then we've got the other two stages which are going to be happening from 2024 to 2028, and that's another $49 million to come. So that by the time we finish this project, we'll have invested $150 million in a stormwater outcome. I think the point there to take home, for the take-home message really, is that some of these new areas that we're developing for greenfield are very expensive. So that's $150 million just for this one area that we've had to develop. I think it's really important going forward that our new greenfield development reflects the true cost of infrastructure. I think that's the take-home lesson for council out of this project, but I think bearing in mind where we've come from, it's been a really great technical outcome. And just moving on to our St Mary's Bay project. This is another project that we're very proud of. The shot that you've got up there shows the marine pipeline actually sitting in the water outside of the West Haven. I'm pleased to report that this is a little bit more up to date, that pipeline has now been installed and is virtually complete. The new diffuser's in place and 80% of the backfill is in place, and the whole project is due for early completion in June 2021, 2 months ahead of schedule, which I think when you take COVID into account, that's an exceptional performance. And I think a lot of the credit has to go to our contractor, McConnell Dowell, who have been an absolute delight to work with in this project. So just put in a plug for McConnell Dowell, because they really deserve it. They've done a fantastic job. And I think it also shows the benefit of really close collaboration between the contracting parties and the Healthy Waters team to achieve the outcome. All in all, the project is coming in on budget, and when you take into account the consenting and everything else, this project is $45 million, but I think it's an excellent investment in terms of the water quality outcome that it's going to derive. This is a key part, as you'll recall, of the Western Isthmus Water Quality Improvement Program, and so it's great to get one major milestone ticked off for that initiative. Happy to deal with any questions.
Right, thank you. Finance, anything more from you?
Yep, we haven't.
So why don't we just get to the end and then we'll go back and ask questions to everybody, if that's all right?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in terms of operating performance, Ross has already foreshadowed our performance is favourable overall to budget, and probably the biggest change definitely compared to what we expected in the emergency budget is that consenting volumes have not dropped, and in fact they have increased on pre-COVID levels. Also high numbers of building inspections, as you would expect alongside that. The volumes are providing challenges to us. It is hard to get enough staff, and obviously it wasn't quite planned to go this way either. And it is quite a nationwide challenge where a lot of the consultants we outsource work to are also at capacity. So we are starting to see some reductions in timeliness, and you'll see that come through in the non-financial performance measures as well. Other areas related into the property and construction sector are also ahead of budget, for example, LIMS and property files. And I'll hand over to Karuna, who'll briefly touch on the non-financial performance measures.
Kia ora. I'll run through the performance measures and then onto the highlights. Firstly, as you'll see up there, 28 measures were updated in Q2, with 12 being met and 16 not being met. COVID-19 has continued to impact usage of our libraries, art facilities, community centres and hire venues. Compared to the same quarter last year, library visits are down 24%, active recreation 19% and community venues are down 25%. We continue to do well in food and hygiene licensing and stormwater management. With consenting, as Nicola mentioned, with high volumes, but performance has been reasonably stable for Q2 and improved from last year for both building consents and resource consents. Customer satisfaction remains steady. Anecdotal customer feedback includes compliments about our speed and communication, with some suggestions coming through for additional online help with digital lodgements. Moving on to the highlights, our customers continue to embrace digital usage. It is driven from increases in online registrations and consent applications. 40% of our problems are now being reported through the online reported problems service, so that's been really successful. Amute was established in 2018 by the Southern Initiative, and it was launched as a social procurement and supplier diversity initiative to help promote the growth of Māori and Pacifica businesses. It enables fair participation in the tendering process, and then their skill, experience and expertise wins them work in industries such as infrastructure and construction. So there are plans to expand nationwide, and Council was the first New Zealand organisation to implement supplier diversity with Māori and Pacifica business and social enterprise. So we've got less plastics going to landfill. And the Carry Dieback program continues. And last but not least, we've won 3 awards for Auckland Regional Park, which won the Silver Award. Our annual report won the public sector category at the CPA Australia New Zealand Integrated Reporting Awards, and our Te Manawa Community Hub at Westgate won the 5-star Green Star Design rating. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that it? Excellent. Well, thank you for that. Now I've got a number of questions, and I'll start with Councillor Walker.
Awatere project, which I haven't seen, but strikes me as very commendable. I would expect that that particular project will be making a significant reduction to reducing emissions. Well, it'll be locking up carbon. Is that something that we actually pick up through projects like that so that we can report on that?
So what we are doing in Healthy Waters is, and we're working in concert with Ports of Auckland, Watercare and Auckland Transport, is developing a carbon model that looks at whole of life carbon accounting. The problem at the moment is people are only looking at carbon from a construction viewpoint, and you don't get a true view of what carbon reduction looks like until you look at the whole of life of the asset operation. That's now been built into all of our business cases going forward, but this project predated that work, if you like, because the science has only recently caught up out of the UK that enables us to adopt this approach. It's going to be quite leading edge in terms of, I'm not aware of anyone in New Zealand at the moment that's doing whole of life carbon accounting. It's been done strategically to suit arguments, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the true situation.
And the other question I've got, and I'm sure it's in the detail somewhere, is just around the impact of fare box recovery as it's affecting our revenue.
Sorry, Councillor
That
Walker, I
goes to
didn't quite
Auckland
catch that.
Transport. It's not a question for you. I mean, you're welcome to go there, but I'm assuming that it'd be a hard thing to answer.
Yeah. Parole, Ross, do you? Yeah.
I just briefly, so we had an underwrite of PT fares all the way through the 6-month period. So in these results, that has the benefit of that underwrite fully included.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. And first one for Craig. The Awatere Stormwater Project, given the cost of these, we know low impact design for stormwater is more expensive, but it has better outcomes. Have you got a view about how we'll actually be able to, well, we won't be doing these things. If we get our stormwater taken off us in a big new entity, do you think that a government controlled entity like that is going to be locally responsive to really important issues like this in terms of, or do you think they might just revert to the big old pipe culvert stuff to keep costs down? It's a bit of a worry.
I think the good news is the world has moved on from the concept of building pipes. Building pipes would be the last thing we'd want to do at the moment. All I can say is that as long as I'm in the tent influencing the outcome, I can assure you community will always come first. And so to me, this is all about, if this is going to happen, we have to take a leadership position, not a passive position, because I don't think anyone in New Zealand does stormwater better than Healthy Waters does. I'm quite proud of that, and we have to lead the way with thinking. And to that extent, I want to control the narrative around industry documents. Like, we want to set up a set of national performance standards that get adopted nationally, that we can use as a blueprint going forward for any, if there is going to be a new business model, we need to make sure that it's starting off with the best possible chance in life.
Thank you. I think
And my other question just around...
on this.
It's on the slides. It's in it. Yes, it's about the consenting volumes and the staff challenges. So given that house sales are not slowing down anytime soon, and we've had problems with getting out limbs and information to people, and we've got problems with resources, if we've got a plan to be able to meet that, be able to get these staff so we can meet our statutory timeframes.
Through the chair, I can't speak in a lot of detail to answer your question, Councillor, but there is a lot of recruitment activity going on at the moment. And
We've got the budget for that.
yes.
Thank you. Councillor Newman.
Good morning. You dropped me in it a wee bit. I was teasing Councillor Hills about the cost of the Little Shoal Bay tracks at a cost of $600,000, and then seconds later you announced the $150 million that you were spending on Awatere. So I'm feeling a little bit sheepish, but I do say that it is an exemplar project, and it has to be designed to the standard that it's been developed, of course, as Craig knows, because of the concentration of peat. So just sticking pipes in the ground in that location wouldn't be a good engineering solution. Be that as it may, it is outstanding. What I want to know, Craig, is that as we move into the recovery phase and we require front-end loading of these stormwater infrastructure projects, what is the capacity of Healthy Waters to accelerate in terms of officers' ability and project managers' ability to contract for the capex required for these big stormwater projects, because we will be under pressure to respond to the market, as Councillor Cooper has alluded to. There's a lot of growth coming, but you took a fair whack during the emergency budget negotiations, and we're going to have to put that back in there. So what can you do, and how much time is it going to take you to accelerate?
So we're back in full recovery mode at the moment, and we're already planning for a much larger investment program going forward. And so we've got proposals going up through the strategic procurement committee in May, looking at what an enhanced delivery model might look like for Healthy Waters, because I think early engagement with contractors and designers is going to be critical in delivering our outcome. And if there is going to be a water reform process, with or without different parties involved in it, the need to secure those resources now and give them that guaranteed workload going forward puts us in the best possible position to take advantage of the market. Right now, the market is ironically looking for work at the moment, but that situation is going to change very quickly as we move into the next stage, particularly as some of the new regulations around water kick in, because water is about to become one of the most highly regulated things in New Zealand, with the new regulator that's been set up initially for drinking water, but the next line of sight is wastewater and stormwater. So the world for water is about to radically change from a regulatory perspective.
Would Auckland Council, would we be like the biggest potential customer for people working in this industry in the country, given the scale of the work that we have and the demand that exists here?
We certainly are, and I think there's also, so there's not only what's happening within the Auckland region, but there's also how we will influence what happens nationally as well. Because I think a lot of our IP is quite capable of being shared across the country. So I think there's two opportunities. One is Auckland-centric and the other is New Zealand-centric. And we're working with Watercare at the moment, looking at what those opportunities look like. Because regardless of whether or not we are part of that reform process, we still have a massive opportunity to take on a national leadership role. And I think that's where the staff want to be as well. And so I think it helps then attract the right staff that want to join the organisation, because that paints a very different picture to where we currently sit.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going back to you, Councillor Cooper. We'll look at staff numbers, etc., as part of the governing body on the 25th of March. That's when we'll have that feedback. Councillor Casey.
I might suck back my question then about staff numbers, but I won't suck back the one on Ports of Auckland and the deficit of 20 workers. Can you tell me where that deficit was within the organisation?
Parole's just coming.
Pramod.
Pramod, sorry.
Through the chair, the reduction in FTEs was as a result of a restructure, and the staff impacted were back office staff.
Back office staff. Okay. My second question is still on the Ports of Auckland, so you might just have to stay there. Can you just, in the narrative around one of the tables, it says here container volumes were down due to capacity constraints. Can you just tell me what that means? Is that staffing capacity or is it something else?
Through the chair, my understanding is a combination of staff and just the volume, congestion issues at the ports as well.
Sorry?
A combination of staffing and congestion issues at the ports.
Congestion issues meaning? Sorry, I'm just trying to say, there is a big dip in their productivity, and I'm interested in how it's described, and I don't understand the narrative, that's all. So I'm just getting it very clear about what is wrong.
The commentary is a comparison of the volumes through the ports at the same period in the prior year compared to what happened this year, and the volumes were lower due to the impacts of COVID and the number of the volume through the ports were lower due to the impacts of COVID.
I'm sorry.
Hold on, Councillor. With respect, these are finance people. And
I didn't hear what you. I just didn't hear the last bit that you said. COVID.
Sorry, Councillor. So the impacts through the ports have been well reported in prior updates as well. So the congestion issues have been well known, and those are the reasons why the volumes were lower compared to the same period last year.
If we're blunt, we'd simply say instead of operating the 8 cranes they've been operating 3. So this month, next month, they'll be operating 4, and that'll go up to 6 by July. But that's the reason for the drop in productivity. If you're not operating the cranes, you're not carrying the containers.
My last question on the ports. In the table under group capital performance, can you just explain that line to me for Ports of Auckland? It looks like does it mean that they just stopped their automation project entirely, or
Can you
did
read the
some
line,
things?
Councillor, please? Can you read the line?
Group capital performance. No, there's no numbers on the slides. It's a budget line for ports. It's group capital performance, and it reads 117.20 bracket variance of 10.74 total. Just trying to make sense of it, and what the line means. What does it mean?
That line, it's a comparison of the actual capital investment to date compared with the budget phasing to date.
Right, so what does it mean though that they didn't do?
Sorry, Councillor, I don't have the detail on exactly which projects have been underspent to date. It is a timing issue as I understand it. The same with any other budget, actual versus budget on that table. It's a comparison of the financial spend to date compared to the budget.
Thank you. Can I just say one thing? Can I have a comment as well? Not about the ports. It's a tiny comment.
All right.
Just there's a line in there about 95% of our assets are graffiti free, and we haven't actually mentioned graffiti free Auckland for a long time. I think we're doing a magnificent job. There's no reason for I just want to say that. I think it's just fantastic. If you visit any other city in New Zealand at the moment with lockdown and kids at home, there's a lot of graffiti. It's a joy. Thank you.
Thanks for ending on a positive. That's really nice. Councillor Hills.
Thank you. I'm not sure who the question is for, but my question is more around so that there's going to be some positive news out of this potentially. If anyone's looking, it's already looking positive. But I guess that strikes a concern for me that maybe we're not doing enough, or we're going to try and get that last 15 million in savings from squeezing some lemons that we might not need to. This is a highlight package of the good stuff and the changes we've seen, but could you maybe tell me how I explain to the public or staff who are asking why we would need to continue to acting the way we have been acting to make savings and maybe reduce projects if we're seeing better results? So it's not, for me, I want to see that go up to 290 so we can do more capital. You know, I am hearing some positive noises from Craig and others, but I just want to know what is my kind of comms angle on we're doing better than we did.
Sure, happy to respond to that. So I guess this is showing that, the highlights of that 6-month period, which were pretty favourable. I guess looking ahead, it's covered in the reports, hasn't really come through on the slides. There are still risks out there. So one of the things on the negative side of the ledger is the timing of asset sales. So we set a big target, 240 million of asset sales cash to be realised this year. So we're still confident that that's an achievable target over time, but it's going to be delayed. So there's a big, in the asset sales picture going forward, there's going to be an impact there. The other big risk is COVID and lockdowns. So, we're not out of the woods yet. We've all experienced what can happen with lockdowns. The situation can change quickly. So, what that means for the next 6 months, is hard to tell. So we think it's prudent that we take a cautious approach. I guess the other thing to mention is that what we're looking at is some good performance, or performance compared to budget. So things aren't as bad as we thought they would be over this 12-month financial year. We've seen in particular the property market and regulatory volume has been a lot stronger than we thought. Everyone kind of thought property prices would fall 10%. They haven't. They've gone up 10%. We thought developers would slow down. They haven't. They've been going full steam ahead. So that's the current year. We're also in the middle of consulting on our 10-year budget. The outlook further out hasn't really changed all that much either. We'll be reporting to this through workshops starting from next month about that longer term picture. So it's a question of, yes, we've had a really good 6 months and some things have come in better, but there's still lots of risks. and some of the things that impact the council, such as the ports, dividends, airports, parts of the council group, Auckland Unlimited, where they're exposed to concerts, with international visitors. So a lot of those things haven't changed. We've still been hit by COVID, but just not as bad as we thought, particularly in that 6-month period.
Thank you. And I have two quick follow-up questions. One on the how do we describe a surplus? So it's been explained really well here before, but I can't exactly remember. So people see the headline, council has a surplus, but it's not magical money, we're just not spending. Can you just describe how we talk about that's not just 190 million sitting that we chose not to spend?
Yeah, so I guess it all comes down to cash. It means we've got a bit more cash in the door than we thought, a bit less cash going out. Where any sort of surplus cash that we create from operating, that goes into funding the capital program and reduces the amount of debt we need to borrow. So it all kind of washes out into cash and debt. And so the outcome of this strong operating performance, as John has indicated, is a better debt position. We'll have a bit less debt and a bit less, and our debt to revenue ratio will look a bit better. So end of this financial year, it's looking like debt will be a better number. It'll be lower than we thought. So that's kind of where it washes out. It's cash and debt. That's the bottom line for us.
My last question, probably, Madam Chair, you focused that we'll be talking about job numbers in a later date as well. But I guess it looks from the figures that our council, Auckland Council proper, has been, doing the heavy lifting on reducing those jobs when, say, in Watercare and Auckland Transport have lifted their numbers. So I guess we don't have direct control over that, but the CCO review says we should be working along, much closer lines. Is there any concerns over those increases for them, or were they unavoidable because of capital works and extra parts of the business AT and Watercare have done?
Yeah, I think in terms of diving into the detail, the CCO oversight committee is a place to get into that. At a sort of a high level, that the roles there are frontline services. Some of them are related to revenue generating activity. So it's not increasing back office staff. It's stuff that's frontline delivering services, bringing money in. So from that perspective, it's not a significant concern.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson.
Thanks. So what does that, that on the face of it, that better news, like the consent volumes in regulatory being higher, higher expected revenue. What does that then do to the to that other figure that's got bandied around a bit, the $450 million hole? So when I go there and look and see, $54 million lower regulatory revenue, does that materially impact on those sort of figures that go to those kind of headline sort of $450 billion holes?
Yep. So the emergency budget had a $450 million expected reduction in revenue for this financial year. The fact that regulatory revenue, IGC revenue, is held up means that when we get to the end of the financial year, it's probably going to be a smaller number than the 450. The 450 isn't going to go away. We're not going to find hundreds of millions of extra revenue, but it is looking like it'll be a better picture overall, with a bit more revenue by the get to the end of the year. That's offset by other things such as the asset sales timing, but overall we think it'll end up with lower debt by the end of the financial year.
And just on something, and I just would appreciate a little explanation here, in terms of things like the regulatory. Now it mentions revenue and then higher corresponding costs in the same breath. So does it follow if there's not just regulatory but other parts of council's operations that have been identified, is there then savings if there's not the demand there? So for instance, if there's lesser coming through the regulatory, I assume the costs are lower, and is that reflected in the figures then that contribute again to that $450 million and $1 billion? Do we allow for that in those figures?
In terms of the areas where there's higher demand, yes. So in the LIMS area, for example, we've had to bring on temporary contract workers to deal with the volumes in that area. So if we did not have the volumes, we would not have the extra staff costs. regulatory also has substantially higher costs to manage to process all of those volumes.
So yes, in general, a lot of the extra revenue has some extra cost associated with it. But overall, in that 6-month period, we've seen better than budgeted revenue and better than budgeted expenditure overall.
Okay, Councillor. With no further questions, I'd like to thank the staff for the preparation of their report. It's very detailed. Thank you very much. Ask you to step back. I will move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Angela, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Dalton. And then we'll move into comments. First comment we have, so thank you, staff. Very good. Mayor Goff.
Yeah, and as they disappear, I do want to thank the staff for this. There's 2 comments I want to make. First of all, when you see, look, we've got better revenue than we expected, there's a huge temptation, and I share it with Councillor Hills, that, wow, here's some money we could spend. Or alternatively, other councillors might think, here's some money that therefore we don't need to raise as much revenue. But the fragility of the situation at the moment is still intense, and the freeboard that we've got is vital to keep. If we take it right up to the line and then we face another lockdown, which is not beyond imagination, or post-COVID, we find that the flush that we got from the wage subsidy disappears and suddenly the housing market drops off because of closed borders, we've got to be in a position to be able to cope with those unexpected changes. So the temptation to raise less or to spend more just needs to be restrained until we're in a more certain environment and we understand the risks fully. As it is, we know that we're going to be challenged on the sale of surplus properties, and we also know that from this report that we've hit 285% debt to revenue ratio. A year ago, we were saying 265. That's as far as we can go. So while we should celebrate that the figures are better than what they might have been, we should be cautious about not utilising that money. And I've heard a number of councillors around the table say, let's err on the side of caution. If we pay down a little bit of debt in the short term, if things turn bad again, we have that more freeboard to deal with. The second thing I want to do is talk about Awakeri, and I've been there with Angela Dalton and Daniel Newman and Bill Cashmore. And councillors, if you haven't been there, it is phenomenally good. It is really good. If you want to look at something that you can be really proud of, that we've done as a council, that's a classic example. I mean, we've enabled 13,000 extra houses. We've put in anti-flooding mechanisms, but we've also created open space, green space, in the best possible way, recapturing the heritage of the old kauri swamp. The houses around it are really intensive. And if you didn't have something like that, you'd say, oh God, what are they going to do? But the walkways around it are just fantastic. And I'd put it on a par with what we've done, Councillor Casey in Oawanga in Oakley Creek, where we've turned, those closed drain concepts into something that is a magnificent celebration of our city. And you get a sense of it from the pictures. But if you've got an hour or so, take a trip down there, have a look, take a walk along the walkways, and you can really see some fantastic work that Healthy Waters has been doing, which is also what makes me reluctant to pass across Healthy Waters to a body that's not directly responsible to council. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Dalton.
Thank you, Chair. I too think that we need to hold fast and stick to our plan, because we don't know what's ahead. We've already had 2 lockdowns since those results have come in, and agree that paying down the debt is the priority so we get some headroom. Look, I just wanted to congratulate Craig as well. What an amazing project it is out at Awakeri. And coming back to something you always say is, how do we tell our good stories? How do we get that out and get the people of all over Auckland going to have a visit? Because it is so worthwhile. It is absolutely beautiful in the middle of Papakura down there. And I just wanted to, one of the highlights talks about the success of Amatai. and they fly under the radar, you know. They're doing such great work, $45 million worth of contracts for Māori and Pacifica businesses, 300 jobs in South Auckland, and it will be more than that. They're changing lives, and they're doing it without any fuss. They're just getting on with the mahi because they know what to do. And so I hope that we continue to support them because that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of making sure our people are employed and our businesses are staying afloat. So otherwise, thanks to the finance team. It's a great report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, I echo the comments in relation to Kerry. If anybody wants to come door knocking with me, I'm more than happy to lead a delegation as we knock on doors in the area and talk to the residents, and you can check out the project. It is magnificent. Chair, I think that one of the things about our advocacy to DIA on the Three Waters Review is the contribution that the council is making to decarbonisation of the urban environment through 21st century stormwater design, which is absolutely in keeping with the what the Climate Change Commission's report set out as a requirement to respond to the climate emergency. Whole of life contribution to reducing carbon is a consideration, and it would be good to start to really quantify some of those big healthy water stormwater projects in terms of contribution to decarbonisation, because I have no doubt that we will do better in Auckland than almost anywhere else in the country as a contribution towards achieving that, because of the IP that Craig and the team have developed and because of the scale of the work that they undertake. So I think that it's a very relevant point to take up, and I would ask that beyond a financial consideration of the group's performance, that there needs to be some reflection on our advocacy to central government as part of that Three Waters Review around what we can do for decarbonisation in terms of a stormwater response, because they won't, outside of Auckland, they won't do it as well as us.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody because everyone's tried so hard. We've put huge expectations and requirements on our staff, and they've done an amazing job. I also just want to, of course, thank the regulatory staff, especially in the consenting, our inspectors, because, you know, the construction, we thought it was all going to go to hell in a handbasket, and it hasn't. We thought nobody would buy houses. It's gone crazy, and we did cut some staff, and we're working on getting more again. But I think that's been exceptional that the customer satisfaction has stayed at the same level. So I just want to thank everybody for the work they've done.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's probably just echoing what Councillor Cooper says. I think we thought 6 months ago that things would be very, very messy, and they have been, and it's been extremely difficult for many of our staff and our communities and departments trying to hold everything together. But I think in spite of that, there's been a huge amount done. We've kept our libraries open. We've kept our maintenance pretty, you know, top shape in most of our communities that you can see. And, you know, as a liaison for Auckland Unlimited, the amount of different things they've been able to do, working with business, getting funding from government to help local businesses, thousands of them, and really changing up what they were normally doing. I think the zoo, Councillor Watson, in January was 30,000 visitors above what they expected. You know, things like that, which is bringing revenue that helps the overall picture. So it's pretty phenomenal. But I think my concern is that we ensure we are flexible enough to ramp up some of that work and not let costs escalate. If we improve the situation again in 6 months, I don't want to see that we've not taken advantage of doing some of that work while interest rates are low, while our community's crying out for those renewals and things. So just want to make sure that we are not just celebrating the wins, but we're actually trying to be flexible to change up what we need to do, because I know there's been so much pressure on staff and there are departments that do need a couple extras and things over time, and I'm sure that's always being looked at. But yeah, congratulations to everyone to get to those levels after 6 months of during a pandemic is pretty phenomenal. So thank you, and thanks to you too, Madam Chair.
So thank you, and thank you everybody. I'm not going to repeat what everyone said, but we're only halfway there. We're only halfway there, and these figures, of course, are only to the 31st of December. And there is a big lever that we know already that we're not going to achieve, and that's one of the asset recycling, nearly $250 million, all right? We're not going to get there. We know that now. So I think celebrate the success, but be very wary and cautious as we go through. Peter, to you and your team, thank you. They've done an outstanding job. It's a really tough year, and I think they're actually exemplary people, so please pass on our combined congratulations. Right, people, we have a mover and a seconder receiving the 6-month report. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried.